Hello, my name is Miriam Fernández Santiago and I teach literature and critical theory at the University of Granada, where I also make research on contemporary literature in English and some critical instruments that are currently being developed within this field. Today, I would like to introduce you to the notion of vulnerability and its relevance for literary studies. Vulnerability has been broadly defined as a situation of risk that endangers the integrity and well-being of individuals, and therefore it might apply to many different states and conditions that can often intersect and reinforce each other, such as race, gender, citizenship, precarity, or disability. Thus, vulnerability is typically understood as something negative, a problem that we should prevent, avoid, or solve. As such, it is an invaluable tool for the narrative development of a story, which unfailingly revolves around some vulnerability or other that is to be addressed and solved as the story unfolds. Also, in lyrical poetry, the feelings expressed through the poetic voice often result from experiencing or witnessing some situation of vulnerability. In drama too, character construction, dialogical exchange, or plot development depend on vulnerability to a large extent. As a test, just try to picture an invulnerable Hamlet. At this point, it is necessary that I distinguish between two main types of vulnerability at work in a literary text: human and textual vulnerability. The very idea of human vulnerability is based on an ideal of human integrity and autonomy that is put at risk or somehow compromised. This ideal is normalized by the presentation of vulnerability as a problem, which implies that by virtue of metonymic projection, vulnerable human beings become a problem. It has therefore been argued that the representation of human vulnerability in literary texts may be the cause of discrimination, marginalization, and stigma of human beings in real life. This is so much so that much of political discourse and social policies are based on the notion that vulnerable people are a social problem. Human vulnerability, however, is a powerful instrument for literary texts to the extent that the higher the level of human vulnerability represented in the text, the less vulnerable said text often is regarding its effect on readers, in terms of emotional and aesthetic intensity, narrative, lyrical or dramatic tension, character complexity and depth, etc. Conversely, literary texts depicting low human vulnerability are at risk of displaying an eventfulness that may cause boredom and disinterest in the readers. The exploitation of human vulnerability as a resource for literary production thus establishes a relationship of inverse proportionality between textual and human vulnerability that presents an ethical problem. This problem is most evident if we consider that as a cultural products, literary texts may target profit beyond the merely aesthetic, that is, that they are often commodified as a consumer product for the economic profit of both authors and publishing houses. The representation of vulnerability as a negative condition in literary and other artistic forms is therefore problematic, not just in ethical but also in economic and socio-political terms. However, addressing this issue from the ethical and socio-political prism invariably leads to issues on overt or covert censorship that directly involve the exercise of individual and social rights, such as freedom of opinion, or interfere with identity politics. As he defended literature poesy against Puritan censorship in the late 16th century, Sir Philip Sidney already noted that accusations of poetic bias are unfounded because the realm of literature lies beyond truth or immorality in the sphere of the possible. Although strictly speaking, this cannot be denied without mistaking the fictional with the real, denying the impact that literary ideations of vulnerability can have on the realm of the real would also be a mistake. As the ethical and aesthetic conundrum on the use of human vulnerability for the sake of textual invulnerability seems to stand apparently irresolvable, new approaches to vulnerability and its representation in literary form are currently developing that involve a positive conception of the term that affects both the human and the textual. In my next videos, I will be presenting a vulnerability scale that helps establish a correlation between human and textual vulnerability, as well as the notion of an ecology of vulnerability as an alternative to the negative conception of vulnerability and its application to literary analysis.